the master today, and this lady is able to channel or the Holy Spirit basically, and the Holy Spirit is saying, okay, well, the God energy is the crystal ray energy. So I'm like, okay, and I used to call them the masters of the ray. So I'm like, okay, well, here we are. We're right here at the same thing. So in describing what that crystalline God energy is, because it's a crystal energy. It's like everything here is crystal. Everything is crystalline. We have everything from liquid crystal and water to the solid crystal. But in our bodies are crystalline. They're made up of different crystalline components based on their state of matter. So, anyways, all this is crystal. So, crystal relates directly with the feminine. It's her. We call it crystalline or Christ, Allah, crystalla, and so you're like, okay, well, the Christ aspect has to be feminine then, because she is the crystal. So crystal is related with Christ and Allah is God. So she is God, the mother goddess of heaven. So that energy is what comes into people, like that Christ energy, which is actually. So if you think about it, it's in fact a she. So if you look at it like that, then it's like, well, that's why all the great teachers have been males, because it's perfect balance, because she comes into the male avatar and balances it out to transmit the word. And that's why she's like, I'm not needed anymore, because the whole spirit, the perfected balance, is coming next time. So it's like the whole thing is like that's why I'm like, you can't even to try and convey that into words for people's understanding, the significance of that. It's like since the very beginning, it's like, and since the Holy Spirit first left, which we remember in our consciousness as the sinking of Atlantis. So since then, it's like the male and the female haven't been perfectly united. And then, right? So
hence the chaos.
Hence all the chaos. So it's like this is the first time since the beginning that it's going to be dwelling here on earth again as its whole self.
So what allows it to do that at this time?
It's the unification, because again, it's like once the Holy Spirit left, then what was left here was just thought, unilluminated thought, and then matter. So thought had to come together with matter through understanding in order to bridge that gap, to see it as one. Like that truth, matter, consciousness, thought, it's all one thing, which creates which is the whole spirit.
And that's when the laws came into being.
The whole spirit is what you would call the creator or God. What it talks about in the Emerald Tablets is that when the dweller came, how the dweller created Atlantis was just through his thoughts. So it thought everything into existence. So that's what they just recognize as God. Because Atlantis isn't, it's like I told you, I'm like, it's not just a three-dimensional place. And back then it didn't even exist in this density. But it's a trans-dimensional city, location. It's the city of heaven. It's that real place that everyone has been imagining. It is what Atlantis represents, because it's the transdimensional city. So then by its sinking means that it was cut off. So it was cut off, or the lower dimensional aspect of it was cut off from all the rest of it. And that's what all of this history aspect is this history is reflective of the period from when the dweller departed, the Holy Spirit departed, which caused a disconnect, because that was when the deluge came. So the deluge came right after that, the post, whatever. So then this disconnect has been happening ever since. So the only way to bridge that connection is through the illumination of thought, with coming back to its counterpart, which is law and truth. So it just
makes sense.
So it just took time. It took time for it to come back full circle. So that part where it was a seeming divergence between the male and the female aspects of truth, the Holy Spirit, God, whatever, has created understanding. Has brought us into a full understanding of the union between both and the necessity between both, and how both play different roles, but the same role together. And that's why, and the Cometians obviously understood, and the ancients understood that. That's why they're like Osiris and Isis. It's like they're brother, sister, husband, wife. Of course, what else could you be? Because the divine feminine in relation to the divine masculine is what?
Everything.
Yeah, she is his sister, she
She's
is his
everything.
daughter, and she is his wife. So that's why we have it like that.
The three in one.
hmm So you're gonna have, so it's split between, so the son of God would be the daughter son of God. Like it's never just one; it's daughter son,
Mm-hmm.
and then just like it's husband wife. Or it's just
So it
never
has to
just
be in
one.
balance.
Yeah, it's never just one.
Right. Because balance always has to be maintained.
Yeah, because it took two in the beginning. Well, not two, because the two were one in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So the two being one in the beginning, then it's like when they split, it's like it's still the same one that's just split amongst its own self. Not two, and then when those two come together, then they create this third. So
Yes. Perfect union.
it's always just one. So all of that has been put into my consciousness and going forward with this because
You said something yesterday when we were talking, and I wanted to elaborate on it a little bit. You said, I'm back, and I want them to know, people to know, what that felt like when you realized you were back. You told me that you were all of a sudden aware of your body.
I mean, it was just utterly surreal because it means that I had gotten to a place of perspective to where it's like everything that I had known up until that point as to who or what I thought I was, then I moved into a new place to where I could have a difference of perspective and see something completely outside of that. So by recognizing that moment, then I knew that I was back. I was back as myself, not as this imposter, not as this false identity, not as, what the world has taught or has, described my avatar to be or the actions of my avatar to be, but rather the spirit that's within my avatar. And that's what I recognize. I'm like, my spirit is back. Like, this avatar's been here waiting for my spirit, but the spirit that was in my avatar was still my spirit, but it was unaware, and we call that the false ego or whatever. And that it's kind of like a position holder. It was just kind of like keeping the seat warm. So that's what I meant by I was back, because it took a long time to bring the full conscious memory of self through this, what we call these channels or these conduits, these avatars, into this reality. And it took, like, I mean, the information, it's like unpacking information. So unpacking all that information, then I finally got to a point in unpacking till I realized that I'm like, yeah, I'm back. Like, I'm here. Like, I got here now. And I have a perspective. I have a perspective that I've never had before. And I have a perspective from a completely human, like, experience, while also something that is beyond human, something that is opposite of human, something that is in conflict with what we call humanity, because everything that humanity is what our spirit is not. So to see those two things face to face, looking at each other, and knowing that I'm both, while more fundamentally spirit than this, it's like, yeah, that's what I meant about that, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
I'm trying to clarify.
Thank you.
Hard thing to describe. So I was thinking about that all last night. I'm like, I opened it up by saying I'm back.
Mm-hmm.
I'm back. Like,
I know.
Back. But I'm like, that's crazy. Like, I never really talk like that. But
Which just shows the message needed to come out. It's time people know.
some people know.
And you're not alone. There are others out there that are looking for you.
Well, the whole thing is, people call for this. People have been asking for this. They might not understand the significance of things like memes, which are our smallest unit of information, but this spiritual war has turned into a meme war. It's an information war. It's the smallest bits of information to persuade people into different choices or whatever. But what has popped back up on the internet in 2016 and prior to was that whole thing with Kek or Pepe, which is the Commission God of Chaos or Change. So it popped back up in the human consciousness to where people were putting out these memes on the internet that were spreading, and then people were, you know, adding on to them, doing new things with them, but they were doing meme magic. They were doing a form of ancient Cometian magic, which is, you know, you have your sigils, your symbol or whatever, and then you have your intent that you put behind it, and then as you spread that around, then what are you doing? You're bringing it to life because you're putting it into the consciousness. So that started to reemerge. So that just shows humanity's connection with our ancient past, with Kemet, because what are we moving into with emojis again? We're moving into a language that's that represents that old type of language that we used to have. So with this with this meme magic, what we have that emerged in 2016 is we had a thought meme reemerge back into the human consciousness. And whether people realize this or not, I mean, this started in the forums, and if you had followed this, then you saw that the idea of thought was reemerging back into the human consciousness in such a way that it was spreading thoroughly, and people didn't really understand why. And it's just an evolution of thought. It is an increase in thought. It's our recognition of that thought is primary in getting us through this period of time. So this magic, I mean, the word magic is not understood, but it's used every day, because what is magic other than the direct direction of the word? So when I really stepped back and looked at this, then I'm like, well, no one can really be surprised that, you know, somebody would come out and say, hey, I'm back, because you called thought back. And by calling thought back, it's like it's permission. We gave permission to that force, to that entity that we call knowledge and wisdom. Now, we don't look at knowledge and wisdom as a living entity. It is a living entity, and that entity was invited back, and that's all it's been waiting for, is that humanity had to get to a point where it invited it back in. Wisdom, knowledge, really back in the purity of that back in. And that's just what we got. It came. And now when we think about all the things that are credited to thought, which is, you know, magic and all this other stuff, then how could anybody sit here and try to pretend to understand all the things that we're witnessing around us? Because that's to say that you understand, you know, the fundamental aspects of magic, where it derives from. That's like saying, like, you know, explain to me what Heka is. What is Heka? What is the god Heka? What are the utterances that were left in the papyri of Ani, that were left in the book of Coming Forth by Day? What were they saying when they were referring to Heka, when they would acknowledge Heka as the god that existed before all the other gods came into being? Well, if Heka existed before all the other gods came into being, which are human beings, or man, so Heka existed before them. What is Heka other than spirit, other than the word itself, the magic under direction? So that's what Heka was, and Heka is what I'm talking about, because Heka is part of the primal world, part of the original attributions of existence, which has taught man everything that we know. So, but we just know it as magic now. But it's a living entity of itself again. So if you're working with magic, then are you working with that entity in of itself? And if you are, then how can you get that to do whatever you want it to do? Because it doesn't recognize man as an authority. It recognizes spiritual and divine man as an authority, but not human man as an authority. So all of these things are starting to reemerge and are going to come back into the conscious memory of humanity, because as we move into these times, it doesn't matter what people believe anymore. It doesn't matter what people believe, because, you know, you might believe this, you might believe that, but we're moving into a time where these are universally known objective truths, such as 2 + 2 = 4. It's so those that are hanging on to these belief systems, these old ideologies, and their own interpretation on how these things are supposed to go down, are the ones that are going to be completely lost and completely just swept away, because this has nothing to do with that. This has everything to do with, when you look up in the skies, when you look at the world around you, it's trying to tell you what it's trying to tell you. But we have to have the patience, the endurance to sit there and listen and try to understand it, and not with the human mind, not with the human understanding. Because I mean, is that not what all the scriptures talk about? So we won't get anywhere with human understanding, because look at where the world is right now with human understanding. It's time to move into that divine knowledge that we all carry within us, that we brought with us. So it's about recovering lost information. It's about extracting information from within. It's all the stuff that everything has been talking about, but now this is actually the time where that stuff has to be put into action, or has to be it has to be the way that you're living. You're living with that information, with those methods that were given, those practice disciplines, all that were given before, because we have to what's the word for that? Integrate it. It has to be integrated. It has to be integrated and practice every single day. And then
when you're talking about practicing, you're talking about living by the laws, the basic principles of our foundation, which people have forgotten.
Yeah.
You know, so you're talking about people actually connecting again with their inner self. You want to talk a little bit more about that, about the road to that?
The inner self?
Because that's where the knowledge is.
Yeah, and it's to understand what the inner self is too, because we have this idea with the higher self, as we call it, and it's great. I mean, because we are trying to connect with something that does reside within us, and it's like, what is that thing that resides within us that seems to be guiding us? We call it our intuition. We call it this. We call it different things. But ultimately, to reconnect with that, and what I'm talking about applies to reconnecting with that. But not only reconnecting with that, because that is the first step. The first step is just recognizing that you are something beyond the corporal, something beyond the physical body and the limitations of the physical world. And now, what all the teachings are about is how to, like you said, how to connect with that. And to connect with that, I mean, just think about this. When we think to ourselves, when we're having our inner dialogue with ourselves, I had pointed out to somebody some years ago, I'm like, that's your internal prayer. I'm like, who else can hear your thoughts but you and God? So every thought that you have, I mean, that's a constant conversation that you're having with God, whether you include Him, consciously in the conversation or not. It's like divinity's always including that conversation. So that's that whole being mindful of our thoughts, because it's like, what kind of thoughts would you bring in front of the divine? Would you, like your complaints, your all those impure thoughts? It's like, why would that be worthy in front of the divine? So it's like, if we can't even protect our own inner headspace as far as controlling our thoughts, then it's like we have no hope with connecting with the divine, because the divine is the antithesis of all those negative thoughts. So to connect with our own selves, which reside in the higher plane, which transcends good and bad, or the dichotomy between this and that, then that's already to say that those things are in balance. And for those things to be in balance means that that we need to recenter ourselves and detach ourselves from the world and our conceptions that we have that filter through our emotional centers, and rebalance our emotional centers. Why do things have to be so expressed emotionally, as far as, oh, I love that or I hate that? It's like, why either? Why can't you just accept it for what it is? And that's what connecting with our true selves is an acceptance of things as the way that they are, and knowing that they have a reason for being the way that they are, and that with every single person, interaction with anything in this realm, each one of those things or people serves as your teacher, because each one provides a lesson. Now, you can either be the hard-headed student, not extract the reason behind the lesson or the meaning, or you can. And if we do, then what happens is that you become naturally in a state of balance, because you're looking at everything as this opportunity. Everything is a gift. Everything that helps you get better. So then what enemies do you have? All of a sudden, then your worst enemies become your best friends, because they give you the hardest lessons. And then you realize that your closest friends are actually the ones that hurt you the most, because they try and sugarcoat everything. So who is really out here looking out for you the most? And in the reality of things, it's really those who are against you. Because those who are against us challenge us the most. And we grow through our challenges, through the resistance, through the pressure. That's how we grow. But if our friends say stuff, I'll give you an example. If you're talking to somebody and, and here's a common thing. Oh, that's what I mean. I meant that. I didn't mean this. So, and then, some people even go so far as like, hey, tell me next time that I'm doing it, so that and then to me, I'm like, okay, well, that I could either tell this person, the next time that something like this happens, so that they can be more aware of it and try and hide it better, or so that they can fix it, and I don't know if that's a good example or not, but I had an example that I wanted to give relating directly to this. Let me just think about it for a second, because it's perfect, because we do this. People do this all the time. People do it all the time in the sense that they want to come across in such a way to other people to either sound intelligent, sound this, sound that, but the way that they come across sometimes is not the way that it is received by the other person. So the opportunity that exists there is that if the other person brings it up to that person, like, hey, what you just said made me feel like this, then the opportunity for that person then becomes is, how do I articulate things in accordance with what I actually mean, rather than the person that says, oh, okay, and then doesn't take that as an opportunity to fix the way that they speak, but tries to cover their speech in a way that those inconsistencies aren't noticed. And that's not helpful, because we're hiding something that makes us look a certain way, rather than fixing it by taking that criticism or that constructive criticism and articulating something better. Because it's not the job of everyone down here to interpret what somebody means. It's that person's job to say it in the way that they mean it in the first place. Now, if somebody's constantly saying, like, oh, that's not what I mean, or, you know what I mean, or whatever, and constantly saying that, it means they're telling you that they don't care enough to actually think about what they're saying ahead of time, and they rather just it's not a real fix. They're just patching something up or covering something up instead of filling in the hole. And this type of patchworkery is the human condition. It's like, instead of getting to the root of the problem and accepting, an error or a mistake or a misperception or a way that we articulate something, and working on how we can fix that and present it better, because by doing that, it means that you're committed to trying to understand the thing.
Are you talking about words or humans themselves? But they're both blending into one. It's starting out as a conversation and ending up talking about the person. Yeah. And what's inside of you, and extracting that, whether you do it honestly and straightforward and deal with the situations that are bothering you, or you cover it up and hide behind it.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it's hard to separate the two, like, between the words somebody speaks and the person that they are.
But the words they speak show who they are.
Exactly.
And so if you don't dig deep and find those things that are causing you to speak inadequately or not convey what you're really feeling, you have to dig through all these walls that you've put up to protect your feelings or emotions and those type of things. You have to get past all of that. You have to break all those walls down so that you actually know what you're talking about to begin with.
Exactly.
To hold a decent conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So where this is naturally going is in the language, right? And how important language is. Because as you just pointed out, it's like, well, the words that somebody speaks are no different than who that person is, And as we focus on language, then what we realize is that language is the most important thing down here. And we keep on speaking about these heavenly languages, this divine type of language. Well, what would a divine language be other than proper intent behind the words, because of understanding that's come on account of knowledge? Like, it doesn't matter if it's English, Japanese, this, that, or whatever. So long as it's being communicated in such a way, means that you're a being that's communicating from a place of understanding.
And intent.
And which means intent, because it means that you've transcended the limits of understanding down here, and you're so careful And it's like, why do you think all these great teachers and sages and masters and this, that, and that, why do they speak so slowly? They speak so slowly so that they don't rush into saying something that isn't what they meant. They rather take it slowly and put out something exactly in the way that it's supposed to be, so that it doesn't need a reinterpretation. Because why does anything need a reinterpretation? Just say it right the first time, right? Because simplicity is the mark of genius, and while complexity is the mark of mediocrity. Because if you can't explain it to both the scholar and the layperson easily in a way that they can both understand it, then it means you don't understand it. Because you're long-winded because you're trying to find the right connections, the right words, and you're doing all that, and it's like you're not saying anything. It's because you don't really know what you're saying. You don't have a grasp on the concepts. So that's who this family of truth is, and who these beings I'm talking about. They have a grasp on the concepts. And when you have a grasp on the concepts, those concepts make up your whole foundation. So you build language structures from those concepts, which are infallible. They can't be taken another way. They're only taken in that way. So what happens down here, and what's happened is that all that's happened with language is that they've taken words and they've applied different meanings to those words. That's it. That's all you have to do to confound language. So it's like I can be trying to express myself emotionally, saying these words when the meaning in it is actually something completely different. Mm-hmm. So that's how this magic works down here. So it's like that's why you can't rely on the emotions like that, because you might feel so passionately about this and that, but the words that you're using could be interpreted in something completely different way. So it's like we can't speak with our emotions. We speak with our words. We speak, like, think about it. We don't speak with emotion, do we? Like, we really don't speak with emotion. It's like we might wear emotion, but we don't speak with emotion. It's like we speak with words. The words don't have emotion. The words are empty. They don't, like, the emotion is added with how you speak the word. But the word in of itself has nothing to do with the emotion. That's why words exist not only on this plane of existence, but in the heavenly planes. Why? But in the heavenly planes, it's not this unbalance of emotion, because they're not speaking the words with emotion. They're speaking the words with intent and meaning, which is real emotion. Real emotion is the knowledge, it's the intent, it's the way that you're expressing it, it's the context to which you're expressing it in. But the way that we know emotions down here are filtration systems that help us I don't know what, like, it's a mess, like
it's just a mess.
It's a mess. Because
you were talking about words, and I had a thought, this one I hang on to, about how when you realize that words are just spoken thoughts, and that you are the only one in control of your thoughts, mm-hmm. So any word that comes out of your mouth is strictly your responsibility.
Yes.
And if you really understand that, then that changes the way you live.
Yeah. It does. It really does. It changes everything in the way you live. Because you can't say certain things if you understand certain things. You just can't. How could you? It's like, how could you say something so disrespectful or blasphemous against truth or whatever it is, if you knew it? You can't. Because you wouldn't. You literally can't. So if anybody is, it's because they don't know. So even if they're claiming that they know, you know they don't know, because they couldn't speak those utterances in such a way if they were aligned with their understanding.
Right.
Just the way it goes. So we just, so if you want to know who's saying what, it's just listen to them. Listen to how they're speaking to you. Listen to the words they're saying, how careful they are, and how temple they are with their words. And are these words that are just other words that are repeated by other people and that they're just now repeating again? Or are these words that are coming from a mind that has contemplated on these concepts, that are delivering these words through first-hand experience? That's the authenticity that we're looking for, and we know those people when they speak to us because it's how they speak. They speak with the authenticity in their voice because they're like, look, I've been through it. I've lived that experience, and I'll tell you exactly what it was from not my opinion, a factless opinion, no, from my perspective. And my perspective might not be the same as your perspective, but hey, you know, if we all catch a glimpse of the car accident through our composite stories, we can all agree on the fact that a car accident happened. Now, how did it happen, or the events of it happening, and the specifics of it happening? Well, that's our individual interpretation that we have the freedom of choice with. Now, if you want a more inclusive understanding or perspective, then you can ask other people. But fundamentally, what remains the core truth of that situation is the car accident. Mm-hmm. There's no argument over the fact that a car accident happened.
But people get lost in the details about how the car accident happened, or whose fault it was, or... Yes.
Exactly, and that's how those people are going to get swept away in this change. It's like, it makes no difference, like, to the Devine or anybody else. It's like, if they don't want to elevate their thinking, you know, like, and look at the core of the matter rather than on the surface aspects of what the details, then yeah, because who even knows that my blue is your blue, or my red is your red? Anything, we don't know. You can't prove. You will never be able to prove that. You can spend eternity here trying to prove that, and you'll never prove it, because that's a waste of your time. That's a mental mind loop that people get stuck in. That, you know, you can, you know, the Divine doesn't care. You can play that. You can play that game for as long as you want until you learn that lesson. But underneath that lesson is what? Is that a car accident happened. Yet you haven't been discussing the car accident all this time. You've been talking about that. It's like, how is that effective? How does that move you forward in your understanding and our growth? It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. So we're in a world, we're in a time to where it's about language. And the new language of this day is a language of authenticity that comes from firsthand experience, which is about the pursuit of truth. Truth of being in relation to our own existence and our unified shared experiences. So other than that, it's like these other language, I mean, they're failing. They're going away, because what are some of these terms and things that we've applied meanings to going to have to do with a world where it's in that unified state? It's like all that disharmony, those words applied to disharmony are going to phase out, because we're not going to have disharmony around us. So why would we need the word disharmony or anything therefore associated with disharmony? You know, it's like, let's focus on the words that actually are important, which we call them timeless words. We call them timeless concepts because the concepts are going to remain forever. So we spend our time here with that language and not the language of descriptors, like of, oh, well, this is that, like, this is a sofa versus this is a armchair versus this is, they're all what? They're all something you sit on. The concept is you sit your butt down on that to get off your feet. Now, with the specifics of it, it's like, you know, like that's where we are. It's like we think choice is so great, but when you have too many choices, you can't move. You get analysis paralysis. So fewer choices. I mean, all the surveys show you that. It's like the 30 Baskin-Robbins 31 flavors versus the ice cream shop with 3 flavors. Like, people feel more comfortable with fewer choices. Like, it's easier for them to make a choice than all the choices. So we live in a world where there's infinite choices. Anything can be anything on this day or that day. But it's like, so we're going to get lost in the ice cream shop. We're never going to pick out a flavor. But when you break it down to its core truths, then you realize you're in an ice cream shop not with infinite flavors, but 9 laws. You're like, oh my God. It's like, yeah, it's like you can mix the flavors however you want. You can add sprinkles, gummy bears, cookies, whatever. But at the end of the day, I mean, the ice cream flavors are just 9. Mm-hmm. So that's it. So then you're standing in an ice cream shop or a universe with 9 basic flavors that make up anything you can imagine. So now who's that on? That's on you. Because it's on your creativity to make the combinations to get the infinite expressions rather than the infinite expressions dictating to you what life is. Boom. I like that.
That was a good one.
Yep.
That was good. That's a good message. People get caught up in the details and they're caught up in the details of living and aren't taking this... okay.